Nug update. Coral here to bring you a bunch of cannabis related news stories. I have 2 weeks worth of stories for this News Nug update, and then I'm going on about a 2-week hiatus as well because while I'm traveling, I never know if I'm gonna have Wi-Fi, consistent Wi-Fi, or anything like that. But the first story of this week is from Washington State, and it has been a mess up there with medical marijuana ever since the recreational legalization has happened for adults. So this article was from thestranger.com, which is not it's not a mainstream newspaper, it's kind of an alternative newspaper in that area. And it is saying Washington is the only state with legal marijuana that doesn't allow home grows. It's a serious issue if we're only allowing cannabis to have, for people to have access to cannabis through shops, because it's an amazing plant that the whole plant is beneficial for the person. So when you can actually grow it yourself, you can use the entire plant, you can make the decisions that you want to, whether it's organic. It's just something that every state needs to protect so that we don't have a monopoly on medicine for patients. And Washington hasn't protected patients in that way. It's been super frustrating for people in that area, I know, but I don't know, there's always change. I think this particular article was mentioning a petition to hopefully see change with the medical marijuana scene, but I'm not sure how that's going to be changed in Washington specifically. The next story is a bit of a bummer as well, but it's from California, where a judge had the opportunity to reconsider whether cannabis should be on the scheduled narcotics list, the controlled substances list at all. It was pretty interesting that the judge wanted to hear that particular argument. It was whether or not this act was illegal, and the lawyer brought up, well, cannabis shouldn't be illegal at all, let's reconsider that. And the judge ultimately decided that it wasn't up to them to remove it from the list, and that maybe that ruling would be overturned in the future, but right now they're gonna leave it as is. I feel like it's such a cop-out to just say you don't wanna be the one to legalize it, you don't wanna be the one to make that decision, but you know it's the right decision. The next story is good news for sure. It is about a young girl's seizures in Georgia, paving the way for medical marijuana oil access in Georgia. It's a super narrow law. It's definitely only for people that need access to that specific oil, and it doesn't legalize growing or transporting or possession really of flower to my knowledge. It's just that oil, but she is hopefully getting the medicine that she needs. And I think it was this story that I read in particular that mentioned how many children are dying before the laws are being enacted in their states. New York even has like a 6-month wait period or something crazy where you can't access your medicine yet, and kids are dying from the seizures and complications that could be slowed down with cannabis. It's insane. The next story is pretty much like my nightmare, and I think a lot of you have heard me mention this, but there is a cannabis oil activist who was in Kansas, I'm pretty sure it's Kansas, and it's so frustrating. So she moved from Colorado, and in Colorado she had access to her medicine, and her son knew that it was medicine and it was cannabis and it was not a crazy narcotic that made his mom a dangerous person. So when they moved to Kansas, he went to like a DARE program where they came to his school and were talking to him, and during the program he spoke up and was like, it's called cannabis, not marijuana. That's amazing for a child, by the way. Good for you, mom, to do that. And he just kept saying that it's not as bad as the DARE people were saying. That's really, really brave, and he probably didn't know what he was doing, and you can't always ask a kid to remember to be quiet. Like, it's not the kid's fault, honestly. But he did say that, and they later raided his mom's house. It's something that I think a lot of parents live in fear of. You want to have an open relationship with your child. You want to communicate with them and tell them what's going on with your medicine so they're not afraid of it, but you can't just trust that they're going to know when the appropriate time is to speak up. And I feel like any kid that's listened to like a strong activist parent would totally want to speak up in a DARE class and be like, that's not true, and I heard this, and it's called cannabis. But in all reality, that was a really risky decision for him, and his mom was probably extremely terrified during that entire process. I don't know, it's basically my nightmare for all the parents out there. Good news now, we're moving on to good news. This is from the second week of stories, and it's that Americans' support for marijuana legalization is at an all-time high. Raids are still happening, kids are being interrogated at schools, which is kind of illegal, by the way, but there is support. It's out there. People are polling better than ever that they want medical access for everyone that needs it, and that they even support recreational marijuana for those who want it. It's incredible. There's a cute little graphic on the Newsnug thing that I took from Huffington Post, and there's little pot leaves on the chart showing how high exactly this support is, and they have it here at 53% from this particular poller. I would believe it's even higher, and we're just not asking the right questions, or people don't feel safe to answer honestly. I love it. I love seeing support go up. The next story is super frustrating, and it's about synthetic marijuana, which shouldn't even be called marijuana at all. K2, I think, spice, that bullshit that's sold at gas stations. People die from it. They can hurt other people, they can hurt themselves, and synthetic marijuana was believed to be the cause of 8 deaths in one area in 1 week. That's insane, and this is something that's legally sold. People often turn to the legal cannabis or whatever, like spice, K2 stuff, because they want to be law-abiding citizens. There are a lot of veterans that turn to this stuff because they don't want to test positive for cannabis. They want to continue to go to the VA, and it's, well, that's kind of changed now, but still, they turn to this legal alternative that's hurting them and can seriously, like 8 people in 1 week is absurd for something that's supposed to be an alternative to cannabis, which has never killed anyone ever. Can we just think about that? The next story, I think there are 2 more stories, and the next one is kind of a weird like industry story that I think 5 years ago this would have never been published. But it's a story all about branding, marketing, and selling cannabis in a legal environment. So it was about the packaging, what it looks like, how you want to have it friendly and appealing, but not like cartoonish and child-oriented. You also want to appeal to both genders, because apparently we see things completely differently. And it was just really, really interesting how, I don't know, someday there's going to be like business classes on cannabis marketing, and it's an industry, it's booming, and it's becoming fully legal more and more. And there is this whole article on fastcompany.com about how to be a cannabis brand. It was a pretty interesting read. I definitely recommend checking it out. All of these stories are available on newsnug.com in the info down below, and then also the Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook accounts. And the last story for this recap before the 2-week hiatus is that support for marijuana legalization has been changing among the generation known as the baby boomers. I'm 26, and if you're younger than me, maybe you've never heard of this baby boomer thing, and then there's like Generation X, and then there's the millennials. I barely remember hearing about these things, but yeah, they're defined generations. And so the baby boomers in the past, they were the ones that lived through Reefer madness. They were the ones that kind of bought into it and believed it and told their families not to smoke. They grew up not smoking. And in the past, they've really pulled anti-marijuana. I think they're right now, it was 70 to like 89 is that generation. But this article was saying that even that age group is changing their minds. More and more people are turning to marijuana in times of poor health or times of not giving a fuck anymore if it's illegal, and they're liking it. One thing I kind of thought about when I was reading this article is, what if the people that didn't support marijuana just died first? Because if you like marijuana, you live longer and you're happier and healthier. So now it's just like the population they're polling has gone down, and it's just, I don't know. That's my theory, but I'm gonna smoke some pot about it, and thank you guys for joining me for Newsnug. I really appreciate you staying informed, staying high, and after this 2-week hiatus, I will be back, newsnug.com, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all those places for the Newsnug. Have a great couple of weeks.